Hi guys, and welcome back to our little corner of YouTube. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that at the moment we're trying to finish off the walls in the camper van. And in our last video, I was throwing around a bit of carpet and a bit of ply finishing off the bedroom area. But in this video, I want to turn my focus to finishing off the section of wall that's just behind the driver's seat. And I thought I'd have me a go at trying cladding. Never done it before. So I'm going to have a go at cladding and boxing in the window. And then once that's all taken care of, I'm then going to create a little mini stud partition wall just to try and break up the bedroom area from the rest of the camper van. So let's just get our teeth into it, shall we? First things first, I'm just going to pack out the battening that we've already got in place. Now the original plan was just to clad straight on top of that, and it'll look great in this corner here because it'll fit nice and flush against that carpeted pillar. But on the other side, things wouldn't look quite so rosy because where that plastic trim meets the metal of the van wall, with the cladding on top, there would have been an unsightly gap down there. And of course, that could be easily sorted out numerous ways, but personally I just thought that packing it out 12mm with battening, cladding on top, if my measurements are correct, it should completely remove that gap. And we'd have the added bonus of that 12mm would then enable the cladding to pass past this pillar straight to the bed for one nice even continuous length. The very first thing that I had to do was measure how long the vertical battens would need to be. They were then cut to size, pre-drilled and countersunk. Wood glue was applied to the screw holes, and screws were screwed through the existing battening straight through into the metal of the van. And that, folks, is going to be a running theme for this video. All of the wood that I'm working with in this video is pre-drilled, countersunk, with wood glue applied where appropriate, and screws screwed straight into the metal of the van where possible. Around the window, in the middle at the top, and again in the middle at the bottom, the battening was extended to offer another fixing point for the window frame. So there's the battening for the cladding, and initially there was quite a bit of head scratching going on while I was trying to figure out exactly how I was going to tackle this. But once I got my head around it, it was relatively straightforward. And all it basically is battening into the metal of the van. And in a few areas here and there, I haven't secured the additional battens into the metal. And what I've done is use wood screws in combination with wood glue to secure them. And honestly, guys, it's not going anywhere. I have to say though that after trying to tackle the very first screw, I thought all of this was going to be an absolute nightmare because I used the original screws for, well, the original battening, and unfortunately the threads were too short, so it'd bite into the batten beyond it, it would pierce the metal of the van, but the thread was too short to actually grip, so it was just flapping about in the wind. And unfortunately, locally, I couldn't get any screws with the same diameter, only smaller. But when I tried to put the new screw in, it must have hit like a hole or something behind it, because again it wouldn't grip, and I just thought, oh god, I'm gonna have all sorts of problems with this. But on my second attempt with the new screw, went straight in, no bother whatsoever. And I have to say, all the rest weren't a problem either. It was just that first one. But like I say, with the issues that I had with that, I just thought this was going to be a complete nightmare. But I'd definitely say that it's a success. So let me just show you. Let me just hold a length of wood against it just to show you what we're dealing with here. So you can see nice and flush at the top, nice and flush there. And if we follow it down, we can see that it's just proud of that pillar. In the middle it does kick out a little bit more, but then it tapers back in at the bottom. With that all taken care of, I'm now going to crack on with the window frame. Now the aim of the game with our window frame is to hide as much of the black outer surround of the window as possible. So in order to do that, I take a measurement for the metal mechanism of the sliding window. I then take a measurement of the width of the window, and when the clear glass meets the black of the outer surround, factor in the little wiggle room and use that as my final measurement. It's then just a simple case of applying those 4 measurements to 4 lengths of wood and cutting them down to size. I assembled the window frame using a combination of wood glue and panel pins, and to make sure that the corners were a perfect 90-degree angle, I used my DIY wooden framing square. I did a quick test fit and marked out where the metal sliding mechanism would spoil against the wooden frame, and to combat that I just routed out a small recess. My next step was to mark out where I'd be attaching the brackets and screw them into place. Then all I had to do was screw the brackets to the battens, making sure that the 2 bottom corners had an equal measurement to the floor, so I knew that the frame was nice and straight. With the 6 brackets in place, I've done a loose fit of the window just to make sure that it fits right. I've got it perfectly square and even all the way around, and I'm really happy with it. But there's one thing that I need to take care of now, and that's the actual width of it, because if I show you down the side here, once we've clad all the way around it, once you've factored in the width of the cladding, it's about 8mm deep, you've still got all this additional wood that's overhanging. So that's what I'm going to take care of next. How I decided to go about tackling this was to mark out where the window frame extended past the battens, because what I'm trying to achieve is once all the cladding's been put in place, I want that window frame to have just a small lip past it. With the frame removed, I then applied those markings that I'd just taken to the rear of it, and on the 2 sides of the frame, using the markings as a guide, I marked out a camber to try and follow the contour of the window. I then went to work cutting it out and then screwed it back into place. So there's the finished window frame then, guys, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out, but I'll be completely honest with you and say that it's not perfect. There are a couple of minor imperfections here and there, but to be honest, I don't think most people would notice them. In actual fact, once there's a curtain rail in there with a curtain in, you never see it anyway. So I mean, I could take that window frame out, use that as a template and apply that to a fresh length of wood and put it back in, and it will be absolutely perfect. But I'm not aiming for perfect, I'm aiming for good and functional, and if I can achieve that with everything that I do in the van build, then I'll be more than happy. So yeah, window frame done, and onto the cladding. So this is the cladding that we're going to be using. It's some cheap and cheerful stuff that we've picked up from B&Q, and as you can see, it's 2.4 metres long, 95mm deep and 7.5mm thick, so relatively lightweight stuff. Before I start chopping any cladding up, the very first thing that I'm going to do is just take a measurement from top to bottom to calculate how many lengths of cladding we're going to need to fill that space. And the other reason for doing so is if we're working upwards with the cladding, I want to calculate whether or not that final piece on top is going to need cutting down, and if it does, that's absolutely fine, providing that we don't have to cut so much away that just a slither remains. And in that instance, if that's the case, we'll work from the top down instead, because your eye line is going to be drawn around that window, so I want it to look nice and uniform all the way around. The bottom I'm not so precious about, because that's going to be hidden with a kitchen unit. The only part of it you will actually see, maybe where my legs are dangling off the end of the chair, you might see that little section there. So yeah, I want it to look nice and uniform all the way around the window, because that's what your eyes are going to be drawn to. So with that in mind, let's take some measurements and let's cut some wood. So the measurement that I took was from the floor to where the bottom of our top cupboards would sit, and that was about 1.5 metres, and then divided that by 90, which is the height of the cladding minus the lip at the top, and that resulted in 16.7 rounding up. So what that means for us are 16 lengths of cladding and then a final 17th length at 70mm instead of 90. I screwed them in by hand because I didn't want to risk over tightening them and splitting the wood. With the first length of cladding in place, I then measured to the 2 corners of the window frame just to make sure everything was absolutely straight. And with that peace of mind, I then went about fitting the rest of the cladding. That's the window frame in place with the cladding on top. The main goal was to have a nice transition between the cladding and the pillar behind it, where you can see all that plastic trim there, because where that plastic trim ends, you can then see all the sort of ugly metal work of the van, and I wanted to try and avoid that. The only things that are probably worth mentioning, which I haven't shown you, is that I used a hole saw to cut a hole, obviously, for all of the electrical cabling that will be running underneath the units. And other than that, I had to drill a hole for a USB socket that we're going to have positioned here, so I can hopefully do a little work out on the open road on my laptop, and that socket there will come in useful for that. And you might be asking yourselves, what's that blue patch of carpet that we can see down there? What's that all about? Well, that's part of the main pillar that runs up the middle of the van, and I was always aware that I'd have to carpet that, because the only other alternative was to batten it out further so that the cladding would run over the top of that and past it. One other thing that's probably worth mentioning is that where we have the brackets for the window frame, where they're attached to the battening, what I've had to do with the cladding that sort of overlaps those brackets is just cut a recess in the back of them using my multi-tool, just to allow a little space for the bracket behind, so when we're screwing the cladding to the battening, it's not protruding further than the surrounding cladding pieces, so you haven't got like a sort of a hump in that cladding where it's pressing tight against that bracket. And I think that's it. I wanted to have a seamless transition from the cladding at the front to the rear, so the first length of cladding in the bedroom area is placed just above the highest one at the front of the van. Knowing that the bed's straight to the floor of the van, I then measured from the bed to the bottom of the cladding just to make absolutely sure that it was straight. I then made some marks and set about finessing that first length of cladding. What I mean by that is it was pre-drilled and countersunk. I then planed off the groove at the bottom and routed a nice smooth edge. I wanted to avoid a sharp bottom corner which could be uncomfortable when you sat up in bed. I then screwed it into place by hand and set about fitting the rest of the cladding. The last piece of cladding required a little additional work with the jigsaw and the router to make a nice smooth transition between the previous length of cladding and the ceiling. Happy with that, I then cracked on with the mini partition. I had a loose plan of how I was going to tackle this, but to be honest, really, I just winged it until I created something that I was happy with. So that there's the framing for the mini partition that we're building to separate the bedroom area off from the rest of the camper van. We think that by adding this it'll just break things up a little bit and just create more sort of unique spaces in the van. But anyway, it's a combination of pocket holes, glue and screws with hole saw holes to run the cables through, because the intention is once it's clad we're going to mount all the control units on here, so things like your diesel heater. And that little rectangular area that you can see there, that's going to be a little cubby hole on the bedroom side of things, so it's going to be a little space where you can store your phone, and the likelihood is we'll have a USB port somewhere above it just to run a cable from that to the phone so you can charge it while it's nestled in there. And the frame itself, it's secured to the van on the floor into the bed frame, and there's a screw into the cladding with a little wooden block on the back of it, because obviously the screws penetrating it, and we've got the solar cables running down there, so we don't want a sharp screw sticking out that the cables can potentially rub against and cause an issue. And there's one final screw just securing it to the ceiling, and of course it's not built to withstand an apocalypse, but it should be more than sufficient to live up to the rigours of life on the road in a camper van. So with that, I'll get it clad and I'll show you guys the finished article. To get that perfect contoured edge on the cladding, what I find that works best for me is a small washer in combination with a pencil. And there's the proof of the pudding. Now for those more complicated shapes, my go-to tool has always been a contour gauge, and for most things that I've used it for, it did a cracking job here. Now for the little cubby hole, I did have a mini time lapse of me applying the carpet to the area, but my GoPro decided to have a bit of a meltdown, so you'll have to forgive me for not sharing you that, guys, but to be honest, it's hardly rocket science. But what you can see here is that for the surrounding cladding on the inside of it, I've carpeted it to make it a nice soft surface. I made a final trim piece for the edge of the partition using the techniques which I've shown you in this video, and that, as I was concerned, was the cladding complete. So there you have it, guys. That's how we've tackled our window frame and all the cladding in the camper van, and it's a really straightforward job. Obviously, providing you got the tools, you just need a little patience to make sure you get all the odds and ends absolutely bang on. But I mean, back in my 20s, I think I literally had just a screwdriver and a hammer, but now that I'm in my 40s, I think over the last 20 years I've pretty much picked up every tool imaginable for any DIY job that I might want to do at home. But yeah, a really easy and simple job, providing you got the patience and you've got the tools, of course, to help you along the way. And I'm particularly happy with the way the little cubby holes turned out. I think it looks pretty neat, and it'll come in useful for storing little knickknacks and mobile phones and that sort of thing. Now if you enjoy our content and you want to help us out, you can do so by playing the YouTube game and smashing that like button down below. And I think that's pretty much it for this video. So in the next one, I'm going to concentrate on tackling the side loading door and the rear doors, because I want to get those finished before I start looking at all the cabinetry. Because of course we've got the top cupboards that need to go in the kitchenette unit, but like I say, side loading door, rear doors first. And all that's left for me to say really is thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, guys, take it easy, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, then please give us a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more and you haven't done so already, then please consider subscribing, and don't forget to hit that notification bell down below so you know exactly when we put up a new video. And until next time, guys, take it easy, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.